Board members, if we can get you to take your seats, we'll get started. Want to welcome everyone to our board meeting today. On the safety side, if there's an emergency, the exits or take these doors right here to my right, go in the hallway, right, left, and you're outside. And restrooms are right through these doors across from the hall. So I want to welcome everyone here today. We've got quite an agenda today. Appreciate everyone being here. First thing on our agenda, and we'll dive right into it, is an information item, and it's recess best practices. And I'll have Board Member Earl introduce who we have here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to let them kind of tell a little about themselves real quick.
Whatever
Jenny Earl,
you decide.
District 1, yes. And so I'm just going to say really quick that it's been an honor to work with these ladies and the groups that we've worked with. It hasn't just been this group here. These are just some individuals that we thought would be able to articulate some of the reasons behind the best practices. So we're going to introduce ourselves and then share. We've just got a few slides because we want to answer any questions that anybody has or any concerns. That type of a thing. So anyways, we'll go ahead and start right here.
Great. My name is Allie Teller. I am a specialist in the curriculum department in Canyon School District.
Good morning. My name is Jody Parker, and I am the Health and Physical Education Specialist here at USBE.
My name is Sarah Hodson. I'm the Executive Director of Get Healthy Utah and was recently the Chair of Action for Healthy Kids.
Before we kind of move on to the next slide, I just want to very quickly explain how this even became something that we decided to work on. Almost 2 years ago now, a coalition called Action for Healthy Kids, which involves many community groups throughout the state. We have Department of Health people there. We have Get Healthy Utah is part of this. And many organizations, American Heart Association, that are all Primary Children's Hospital. I mean, we can go on and on and on. It's a really large coalition of people that are interested in the health outcomes of our youth. And about 2 years ago, they decided to do just kind of an investigation, a study, collect data on how recess is in our schools. And we'll talk about those results in a minute, but when we got those results, we kind of realized that there are some disparities. So the group, Action for Healthy Kids, started kind of putting together what are best practices, what does the research say out there? And they started collecting it. And then they actually came to me as staff of the board and asked if we could present to the board what a best practice could look like. And that's when they also then invited Board Member Earl to kind of champion this guideline. So that's just kind of some background for you. So you know this, like we didn't just like, let's do this. It's been a very thoughtful, about 2 years worth of work, so.
And along that lines, I know there's been some questions in the public about this being a structured or kind of a forced type of a recess where kids have to go out, they have to do certain activities and certain things. When I came to the meetings in the spring, that was one of my first concerns was, okay, well, I want kids to be able to choose, go out and do what they want to do. If they want to do creative free play, I hope we're not creating something that does not allow that to happen. And as I listened to the research, as I looked at things, that's not what this is. This is merely saying, this is what best practice looks like. This is what provides opportunity for successful, or I say successful, but for active recess to take place. And so, anyway, so we're going to put these best practices forward. This isn't a shall, this is a may. These are things that the research is showing create environments where active recess can take place. So, oh, and then this is me. So I'll go right there. So I got to see if I can visually see this here. Okay, so on our strategic plan, under Safe and Healthy Schools, strategy B, increase adoption of evidence-based student health and wellness practices. So this falls right in line with our strategic plan. It also, when you look at our our portrait of a graduate. And when you talk about youth having healthy environments and as they are growing and maturing to be able to make decisions that are healthy for them, this goes right in line with that. So, okay, so provide, maybe I'll slide that over a little bit so I don't have to. So what is the purpose? It's to provide elementary schools with best practice guidelines for recess. These are things that have been shown to be effective. Eliminate unsound educational practices. It's interesting, I think it was KSL that ran a little clip on this probably about 3 weeks ago or so, but I had a neighbor that dropped off a little Christmas gift, you know, the little bread or whatever, and he said, I'm so glad you're doing something like this because my granddaughter, she's a fidgety kid and she often misses recess because she's fidgety in class and she has to stay in to finish up her, her schoolwork or whatever in place of going out. And he says she needs to go out. That's the reason why she's fidgeting. She needs to go out and be part of the environment. And then, of course, equal access for all students to participate in active recess. Anyways, this is just a necessary part of the school day. And we passed a rule yesterday that said it shall be included. And so part of that shall be included is these are some successful practices.
So in your backup, you have the document that we have created, the best practices for recess guideline. Within that, and this is just kind of the structure, so there's some background information that just kind of just says what the whole purpose is. And then we have definitions for you, so active recess, organized recess, structured recess. Structured recess is a thing, but that's really, truly, structured recess is when a student is not doing well with the freedom, and so a student, so that they still get recess, they can still participate in recess, but that particular student would maybe have a more structured plan where they don't necessarily have all the free choices. They still get to have activity, but because maybe they're unsafe, they have more structure around them. So maybe they would walk out of recess just slightly after other people, or walk out with their teacher, and then maybe they're with an adult all the time, and that would be structure. Active is students get the choice and they have play, but their choices are, and they can be as creative as they want, but whatever that play is, it's active. They're moving, they're moving their bodies, they're getting blood back into their bodies from sitting all day, and that's active, and that's kind of the difference there. Organized is where there's a variety of activities and games that they can choose from, and so those are the differences. Our best practice is recommending active recess. We have a bunch of frequently asked questions and answers to that. Then we have just some research with best practices. We have a model policy. We gave examples of policies around the state that are very successful. And then we also gave resources with links for more information if any school administrator, individual teacher wants to kind of dive in and do some research on their own, or they want to see samples, they want game ideas, that's on there as well. So why is recess so important? It's because it serves as a necessary break from the rigors of a concentrated academic learning in the classroom. So recess, and this is the research shows that recess improves physical activity. That 100% makes sense, right? Academic achievement, including memory, attention, and concentration. So when students are able to get up and move, their learning actually improves as well. So does their on-task behavior in the classroom. So our wiggly kids, when we take away recess, it actually makes them more wiggly, and they're more disruptive. So when we give them these breaks, these regular breaks, they and aren't withholding them because they're wiggly, then they actually behave better for the rest of the day. And then also their social emotional development improves.
Okay, so our model policy includes the recommendation is at least 20 minutes of daily recess for all elementary school students, prohibiting the withholding of physical activity as punishment. Physical activity cannot be used as a punishment either. Have you ever had that done? We're going to go run a few laps, right? So encourage recess before lunch. This is just an encouragement. Each school is going to be structured a little different. So there are benefits for different reasons. Some of those might even be the children actually eat more if you do the recess before lunch and then they aren't in a hurry to grab their donut or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And then race out to the the soccer field or whatever. So there's some strategic reasons for that, but that would be based on a local decision. And we're also encouraging active recess, where students are physically active during the scheduled time. And there's strategies, and that's where there are strategies, and Allie will hit on that in a minute, that create that success for schools and for the leadership there. So.
And Board Member Earl asked me to just talk for a minute about the survey that we did, and particularly about the withholding recess, what we found in our survey. So as Jody mentioned, in 2018, Action for Healthy Kids did a survey of schools where we sent an email to principals and then followed up with the non-responders and talked to the office staff. And we asked, do they hold recess? When are recesses held? And then we asked specifically about, do they withhold recess for either punishment or for remediation? And what we found is that the majority of schools in Utah do withhold recess from students for one of those two reasons, which is a concern because we believe that students should have the opportunity during the day to be active and to go outside and have a break from their academic activities. But even more concerning is when we looked at the data and compared Title I and non-Title I schools, what we found was in Title I schools, 72% of Title I schools withhold students from recess for one of those two reasons, compared to only 58% of non-Title I schools. So this to us seemed like an issue of equity, that all students in the state are not having equal access to opportunities for recess. So we found that very concerning in terms of the withholding recess. And I'm happy later to answer questions about other parts of the survey if you're interested, but that's the piece that I think was really stood out to us.
So in Canyon School District, I am a specialist in the curriculum department. Just like we have math specialists and science specialists, my focus is on health and PE and recess. So I support training and professional development for all of our lunchtime recess aides and our physical education staff. So we have partnered with a nonprofit organization for about the last 8 years to just really put some intentionality behind our recess time. So like I said at the beginning of the school year, we do an intensive 2-day training for all of our recess aides and physical education staff, and they learn the best practices of implementing recess. They learn how to play games in a more inclusive and positive and healthy way, and then they support students in bringing those games out to recess where they can practice the positive social emotional skills that they learn during the PE time. So there's a picture up there. That's a photo of one of our staff professional developments. Those are all adults that are playing a tag game there, and they're learning just how to make tag games really inclusive in that picture. So we also use a validated evaluation tool called the Great Recess Framework. So along with our PBIS team, we go out to schools in the fall and spring and evaluate recess to see what the safety and health looks like, and then we're able to kind of use that tool to then coach and consult with the principals and the recess staff and the PE teachers on how to make recess even more safe and healthy and inclusive. So we've seen a lot of benefits from investing in that training and that time with those folks that are listed up there. We know that students are resolving their conflicts at recess a little bit better by getting that instruction during PE time and then having it reinforced out at recess time. We know that their physical activity increases quite a bit when they have access to learning the games and then taking them outside. We also do a leadership program with our 4th and 5th grade students where they get training and then they act as junior coaches out at recess. So they're a peer leader and they support gameplay and conflict resolution with their peers and younger students. And then we've just seen a decrease in recess injuries. So we've been doing this with all of our elementary schools. We've really integrated it into our MTSS system, and we really know that and have seen that when you put some intentionality behind recess, that there can be a lot of benefits for students.
So I just want to tell you real quick, I kind of said, prove it to me. And I went out and viewed recess at one of these schools, and this is what I saw. You have the children coming out. There's accessibility to the different balls or equipment that they need. The rules to the games are laminated and clipped on. So if a child has that's not how that's, that's the double bounce or I don't know, whatever. They can go right up, the children themselves. This is an adult having to get involved. The children go over and say, look, here's the rules. And then there's a simple way, it's one time, not four, not best out of, one time. And that's simply, it's understood. The winner of that, if there's a disagreement, so that we can get kids back playing the game. And so it's just providing them with these little intentional things. And it's not complicated. It's very simple. These little intentional things actually create the environment where children can resolve their conflicts within one another, or with leadership, and youth leadership comes in and help. It helps to develop just these leadership skills. So it was really fun to go out and actually see this in practice and see what was going on. And so anyways, I would just, we'll open it up for any questions that you have.
Yeah, so that does conclude our presentation. And
Okay, questions? Board Member Davis. Oh. There isn't any motion. This is information. Okay, Dr. Dixon.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really exciting as I've visited schools where I see opportunities for structured recess and more inclusivity. Kids are just happier, and you see fewer and fewer students standing on the sidelines and feeling isolated. So thank you for this great work. I do have a question about, and this might be particular to canyons or just best practices in general. As a principal, I was really proud of my teachers who integrated movement into content. So I know this is focused on recess, but is there anything you're doing in canyons or that you talk about in health standards or in Healthy Utah where we encourage and give ideas for teachers to incorporate movement in mathematics or English language arts or other content?
Yeah, so within our professional development series, I do some training that is available to teachers to include, we call them brain breaks in the classroom. And there are a bunch of resources with games that they can play that are just quick, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, little movement activities. So I do a training on that. And then I've also supported our other specialists in including those brain breaks into the training they do with teachers so that it's modeled in all of the training that we do as a best practice for teachers to include in their instruction. So, yeah.
I can talk about state. So, Superintendent Dixon, statewide, my battery. You don't get to see that beautiful picture anymore. My battery just died. Statewide, we do trainings on, we call it Healthy Bodies, Healthy Minds, and it's a state conference that we've had for several years that involves every LEA is invited. And last year we had over half, and it was really great because it's a one-day event. But we give out we call them flip books, but they are brain break books, and they are 5-minute classroom activities. And within this also, it gives you ideas for if you're gonna do like a quiz, right? So like A, B, C, D, and you have it up on the screen, instead of like the kids writing A or having like their little electronic device that like gives them an A, they're standing up. And they jump into an A, or they jump into a B, or they jump into and then they can do the same thing with like rock, paper, scissors. So they can rock, paper, scissors with their feet instead of their hands. And it just gives all these really simple ideas of how to involve your core subjects through movement. There is math and mathematics, that's an actual brand name. But we can do movement through science, we can do movement in literacy. We have a great partner that teaches how to move through storytelling. So the students are reading a story, but they're moving and acting the story. So when the tree sways, the kids all sway. So it's a way to get up and active during the classroom as well, yes. So we do have the flip book linked on this practice guideline, but that's the only really mention of in the classroom because this one really was more about recess.
Follow up?
Yes, if I may, thanks. I would just encourage you to attend that conference. It's generally held in
It's typically in June. We
June.
are on hold this year because there's a national conference.
Okay,
Shape America's coming and we can't.
Okay, so in the future, because I know you'll all be here again, we'll make sure that you get that information. It's a wonderful conference. It's very energetic and it's well attended every year. And we also give out an award named for one of our former employees who was so invested in making sure that elementary teachers especially engaged in movement in the classroom. And so Linda Main. And they walk away with not only flip books, but equipment for classrooms. So I'm really proud of Jody and her involvement in this conference. It's really well respected and well attended by our LEAs. So we'll make sure you get that information when it comes around again.
Absolutely.
Board Member Newell?
Thank you for doing this. Couple questions. How do you separate recess from PE?
So physical education is a core required class. So you actually have class time that is physical education, and that's completely separate than recess. Recess is a structured break. Physical education has core standards, and it has the educator that is structurally leading students through those standards, and they're learning intentional skills or a sport or about fitness principle. So we do have core standards, K through 6.
Oh,
For
okay,
physical
through
education,
6.
yes.
Okay,
And
excellent.
then there's middle school, high school as well, but the recess is K through 6. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's physical education standards. And
Wonderful.
it's a separate class.
Great. So they do get a little bit more exercise. Second question is, how are you going to monitor the educators with not holding students back from recess?
So this is just a best practice, so there wouldn't really be monitoring. It would be their local wellness policy. Schools, they have to have a wellness policy right now, and part of a wellness policy has to include physical activity. Recess is part of that. So we are just giving a guideline of what would be a best practice within their own within their own wellness policy. It would be up to school administration to monitor if their own policy is being withheld or being. Thank you.
Yes.
Pregnancy brain, I forget words.
I asked that question because of the disparity that you mentioned to us
Yes.
between Title I and non-Title I schools. If that's the case, there has to be some semblance of monitoring to make sure that
Yeah.
we shift that.
Yep. And we don't have a rule,
Okay.
so we don't have monitoring. We are just trying to
Best-
give them something to go off of. If we provide a resource for our LEAs to use in their policy when they're creating their own, then the hope is they'll see the research and they'll want to use it. They really like documents we produce. They really like when there's support from this agency. So, but by being able to do this, we're hoping it'll really benefit students in the end.
Great. Thank you.
I was just going to say, Sean, that I think, our board member Newell, that I think part of the reason of presenting this here as an informational piece is so that as you go out to your districts and as you talk with LEAs, that you can say, do you know there's this great thing, that there's great best practice when it comes to recess, so that we can engage with our local entities with this, encourage them to get on board with things that are best practice, so.
Board Member Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have several questions, but I'll just do a couple, and then if I could
Let's
reconnoiter
limit
back.
it to 2, please.
Or 12. My first one's actually rhetorical, but how do you make a rock out of your feet? I get the paper and scissors, but I can't figure the rock. I've been doing.
So rock you are feet together.
Okay, all right.
Paper, you go feet apart, and I'm like doing it under the table like you can see me. And then scissors, you go front and back.
All front and back, not
Yeah.
cross, okay. I kind of figured 2 out. Sorry, Chair.
Your next question? Very informative, thank you.
Pretend like that wasn't one of mine. Okay, so I have a question about the training, the cost to that, equipment and games that will happen, even the term structured PE, having a teacher walk them out, then where is the teacher's break time? You know, they already are required by bell time to do their bodily functions, and if they're, so that's my question is.
I can speak at least to how we've done this in Canyons
Well,
District.
Canyons is big, and Canyon has more money than some of our little districts.
Right. So at least for the structured piece, we really try to use our social emotional staff for that, whether it's counselors, social workers. We have behavior assistants in our schools. So I think a lot of schools are getting funding and pushing for the social emotional staff. So that's who we really use to support structured recess. The training, we try to see recess is a really important curricular piece of the day. So just like we have training for math and for English language arts, we don't have necessarily as much, but we have training for them at the beginning of the school year as well. So equipment-wise, do you want to speak to
Yeah.
that at all?
As Superintendent Dixon suggested earlier, we do have that conference that we put on annually, and every teacher walks away with hundreds of dollars of equipment. I mean, it's massive amounts. Department of Health has been so great at getting these great big bundles of equipment. We've given away hula hoops, we've given away playground balls, we've given away entire sets of recess equipment. And so equipment-wise, that's something that we've really been successful at helping with. Training as well. There's also a lot of free resources, and there's grants. Department of Health always has a grant. Primary Children's always has a grant. Like these organizations always are giving grants, and I'm emailing them out to administrators. So that really is. But the training itself, there are a lot of free resources. Again, I'm going to pick on Department of Health. They do, with their own education specialists, they will go out and they loan equipment out, and they also do free training for staff, for school staff.
Okay, can I ask my real other second one?
Probably easier for you to just ask than
Oh, okay.
ask the question instead of ask permission.
To ask the question to ask? Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't convolute this idea with yesterday's idea of having recess count as part of our 990 hours. And so my question is do you see a time when this is going to be a requirement that we are training people to have structured recess?
We're not recommending structured recess at all. We're recommending active recess.
Yeah, and I wrote those two down, and I
Okay.
still can't figure the difference between active and organized, but
So I can address this just a little bit. So, and it kind of goes back to even your previous question. You're going to have adults out with the children when they're at recess, right? I mean, it's not like you let them out, then people take a break, and then, the kids go. There's someone out there. So it's being very intentional about what's going on out there. And sometimes it's doing some training at the beginning of the year. This is how we resolve conflicts. This is how the games are played. So it does take some deliberateness to it. But then once that deliberateness is done, children are left to decide what they will do. And they're left to choose. Am I going to do the creative play over here? Am I going to, you know what I mean? Am I going to do Foursquare? Whatever they choose to do. But they've got the understanding of the rules. They know how to resolve conflicts. And then the staff that's out there, whoever that is, whether that's a resource person or a recess person or like someone they've hired for that, or if it's a teacher, I don't know, however the school structures it. It just is it's intentional or deliberate that they're creating environments for success. A structured recess would be more, this is what you have to do within these, more confined. Does that make sense? This still leaves that choice up to students. And there is a lot of free resources too, because that was a concern. How will districts afford this? How are we gonna, if we force this on, which it isn't a forced, it's, if you want to do this, you can do this. This is what it looks like. And this is the research behind it, and this is why it's successful. This is why there's less bullying. This is why there's less injuries. Anyways, did that kind of answer that question? Okay.
Okay. We have 4 more board member questions or comments, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm the clock guy today, I guess. Board members, Davis.
I guess that answered a little bit of my question, that this is optional for LEAs, optional for teachers, optional for students. This is because, like you, I'm getting emails saying, I don't have time to go to the bathroom from teachers. And so I want to just make sure that we understand that that's clear. This is a best practice and an option. And I just want to add quickly that the other day, in December, my daughter, who's 11 in 6th grade, missed her recess to practice violin, to play violin for the school singing, Christmas singing thing. And I said, oh, that's a bummer. I know you really like recess. And she does fine in school. I've never really thought about it. She said, Mom, it's not about liking recess. She said, I have to have recess to function. She said, it doesn't work for me up here for the rest of the time in school if I don't get recess. It doesn't work. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, this is so bizarre. We're having this conversation because we're talking about this in our board meeting next month. I said, do you want to come and speak? And she said, well, I would, but I wouldn't want people to think that I was influencing your vote. So, this is my little 6th grader, but that little personal experience hit home to me a little bit more that my son's fine without recess all day. He really is fine. But my daughter's not. We have a lot of kids who aren't, a lot of kids who need it for basic functioning and learning when they go back in. So thanks for doing the research and bringing all this to our attention.
Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I too got several emails about this. And I'm hoping maybe you can sort a little bit of this out for me. Some of the questions are about recess becoming instructional time. And if it becomes instructional time, does it mean that a teacher cannot withhold kids from recess as a punishment if it is considered instructional time? First question.
That is the recommendation, is to not hold recess. This is important for them. Now, what that also means is that schools and educators need to find a time when they can do what they need to do, if it's a follow-through on things. So once again, it's intentional, doing things intentionally. This, just like was said here, children need that break. We need the break sometimes. So yes, I think
So
it's.
I understand that part.
Okay, so what am I
My
missing?
question is about, is there in state law or rule something that says recess can be counted as instructional time, and thereby it takes away the opportunity to withhold recess as a punishment? So is there a law or rule that governs
We
that?
just passed the rule yesterday.
So I went through and looked for it, and I couldn't find it. Will you read?
It's not, yeah. But
But there's nothing in the rule that says recess being considered instructional time means that a teacher cannot withhold recess as a punishment. They still can do that.
we're back to best
we don't want-
practices, but
yeah,
it's
we
not
don't want them to
in
do
law
that,
or
but-
rule anywhere that I know of, if that's what you're asking.
Okay.
But
Well,
that's why we're doing the best practices, so that we can find better ways to work with that, so.
Okay. The other question was if it is to be counted as instructional time, must it be structured recess?
And I think we've answered that, no. Intentional is best practice, but not,
Okay.
an active recess.
And they wanted me to discern what's the difference between structured recess and PE. They thought that sounded like it would be the same
Yeah.
thing.
And that was the question that I answered for Board Member Newell. Physical education is a core required class. It is a class time. Students will go to the gym with a trained physical educator and go through the physical education standards. There's K-6 physical education standards that this board passed in 2017. The revised, I mean, we've had PE standards for years. But then not withholding, correct. Yeah, not withholding, yeah. So physical education is completely separate than recess. And even if a student needed the alternative to active recess and was using structured recess, that's still not physical education time. Because physical education time, just like math or language arts or art or music, it's time in the day, or however the school does it. I mean, if they integrate subjects together, right, there's class time, but then the whole class goes down to the gym or it goes outside when weather permits, and they are with a physical education teacher teaching them the PE standards.
So I'll just give you the feedback that what I was hearing from people, they very much were against the structured recess. They were against structured recess because it was requiring the teacher to give up the only potty break they have for the day to do that with the kids. And they were worried about it being counted as instructional time, thereby making recess having to be structured. So that was the upset that I was hearing
I
from
think
people.
what happened was media took several clips and put some together, and it sounded more like that's what we were doing. So, and I think the public was concerned about that, and that makes sense. We were trying to be very articulate here that that's not what that was, so that we want all teachers to be able to access the restroom, so, and to do what they normally do. I'm just saying, a lot of times that's a break they need too. So, but you have someone out, anyways, I won't go into that. It's intentional.
Can I add one thing about? So the structured recess piece, if you look at the definitions, is really getting back to the equity, and that we're trying not to withhold recess for punishment. But when we say that you can't withhold, or we would like you to not withhold recess for punishment, people want an alternative. So what can we do then? How can we support kids in still accessing recess if they really struggle with behavior out there? And that is when you would put into place like a structured recess plan with that one student or that handful of students to really try and teach them the social and emotional skills, conflict resolution, so that they can access recess in a normal way. And that's where we get back to that equity piece of really trying to not withhold recess. That's the intention of the structured recess. It's a temporary thing to give them the skills to be able to get back to a general recess.
Dr. Dixon.
Just have to clarify, I want to make sure that we're not walking away, or the public is not hearing structured recess as a punishment. Salt Lake School District is doing a phenomenal job using equity as a platform and having structured recess for all students in all schools. And I would really encourage you to go see it. When you interview the students in the elementary schools who are engaged in structured recess, they will tell you it has made all the difference for them in conflict resolution in their neighborhoods, in their classroom, and all students are engaged. So when you hear that term, it should not be a punishment term, and it's a really proactive best practice. In Salt Lake District, they have hired people to do this, so the teachers still have their recess break. So I just didn't want anybody to walk away confusing that the structured recess is some sort of punishment or a specific way of engaging in recess.
Board Member Bolter.
So as I'm reading active recess, my mind's going back to when I once upon a time volunteered over at George Washington Academy in St. George, Utah. And it was really interesting because they took the group of us parents that were volunteering and they took us outside and they said, okay, here is a section where four squares is set up and this is how you play the game. This is where, if kids want to play wall ball, this is where they would do it. If they want to do hula hoops, the hula hoops will be over here, and we've got different games they can do with the hula hoops, or they can do whatever. They had a map of the United States that there was a game that they could play with it or do whatever. And then, of course, everything outside of those areas was free play that a child could go. It was really nice to know that, because if I did see a child that was kind of off on their own, and there were people playing four squares, but there was only 3 of them, then I could ask the child, hey, they only have 3 for 4 squares. Do you want to go over there? So I like that where they can do free play, but then there's games set up and the adults know how to play it and they're watching, trying to make sure that nobody is left out. I do, because now it is part of the instructional time and some of Board Member Cannon's concerns that were brought up. And I do understand that if there's a child that's like maybe constantly fighting, perhaps they need to be like walked out, and then maybe the teacher could say, hey, why don't you play wall ball today? You know, why don't you? And I'm understanding with that. I just worry that we don't eventually move to now making recess a structured time of play, where now there's going to be a planned activity that all the kids have to engage in. That's my only concern, but I do like the active recess, and I saw it in play at George Washington Academy before this was even a thing, I guess. And so I am liking that. That's just my one concern, is that I don't want it to eventually flow into now, here's structured, and then we add more stuff to the teacher's to-do list.
Well, I don't think that's being proposed right now, and there's no action, so I think we're safe to say that's how it is. So I appreciate the information that you brought forth, and there's going to be more discovery, I'm sure, and more questions asked, and I thought you've done a good job of introducing where we're
So
at.
this should be posted today or within the next couple of days so that people have a way to access that, the public and such, so.
That is correct. So, thank you for your time.